know, what we're talking about here is transforming the agricultural model. We're primarily focused on Europe, but it's about the way in which European agriculture fits in with global agriculture, clearly, because we're ultimately talking about the global challenge that is inherent in the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's the transformation of agriculture. We heard from two very influential political voices, the head of the FAO and the Agriculture Commissioner here in Brussels, and they gave us their perspectives, and I found that very interesting. But, you know, the one former boss of the BBC, he had a phrase which he hoped would capture the danger of too much talk without much action. Whenever he felt that was happening, he would bellow, "Cut the crap." And, you know, I'm trying to cut the crap today, sort of, because I do want us to focus on practical measures, on concrete solutions, not just on wringing our hands and saying, "Oh my God, what a terrible problem." Which is by way of saying we've got a terrific panel here who are, in one way or another, all involved in the search for concrete solutions to this transformation challenge. They have different interests. Again, the old word, stakeholders. They're all sort of stakeholders of different shapes and sizes in the food production and agriculture system. And I'm going to introduce them to you all, and then each of them is going to give us some opening remarks on this big theme of how to deliver transformation. And then I'm going to bash them about a bit with a few questions. And then, more particularly, you're going to quiz them, digging deep into their particular sort of specialisms and experience to draw out what we can from them. So a lot of Q&A. We've got time for plenty of Q&A, I should say. And one final thing. We're going to break for lunch a tiny bit early because, unfortunately, those of you who follow events in Brazil will know that there's a massive political crisis in Brazil, which means that our speaker before lunch, Katia Abreu, the Minister of Agriculture in Brazil, is not able to be with us. She's had to stay in Brazil because the political temperature is rising so quickly. So we've got plenty of time for your questions for this panel. So next to me, and give this panel a great round of applause, but wait till I've given you all the names, otherwise we'll be here all day. Next to me is Tim Benton, who works for the government, the UK government, trying to work cross-departmentally to get some sort of more broad, holistic thinking about the challenges of food production, health, environment, sustainability across government departments, precisely the stuff we were talking about before the break. His official title is UK Champion Global Food Security Program. He's also a professor of ecology, and Tim, welcome to you. Next to Tim is Giovana Baggio de Bruns, who is the Sustainable Agriculture Manager at the Nature Conservancy, I think originally from Brazil, Giovana. Yeah, welcome to you. Next to Giovana is William Rolleston. He's the Vice President of the World Farmers Organization. Many of you will be familiar with that. Next to William is Bernard Giraud, President of the Livelihoods venture, and also with the title Senior Advisor for Sustainability. Goodness, this is a long one. Senior Advisor for Sustainability and Shared Value Creation at Danone. And I ate one of your yogurts this morning. So I'm a stakeholder in your business. And at the end, we've got John Parr, who I've had on panels before. John, a familiar figure to many of you, Chief Operating Officer at Syngenta. So you can see there's a real mix of insight and interest at this panel, at this table. So, panel, you've promised to be brief with your opening thoughts, but I do want each of you to address this notion that we are now striving to cut the crap to get to very practical takes, practical solutions on this transformational challenge for agriculture. So, Tim, you kick us off.
Thank you very much. I will try to cut to the crap. The Sustainable Development Goals have two top-level aims about ending poverty and then sustainable production and consumption dealing with climate change. And I just want to kick off by mentioning climate change for a minute, because at the moment we are on course for a world of 4 to 5 degrees of climate change. And one of the biggest things that we're starting to recognize is how destabilizing climate is and its interactions with our food system and our water system, and the events outside just underline that point, because some of the destabilization of the Arab Spring and Syria is driven by food interacting with water and climate and patterns of migration of the rural poor into towns, disaffected youth, etc., etc. So we're starting to live with the issues of climate change. And unless we deal with climate change, we are really going to be in a very, very difficult situation. And agriculture and food account for a third, agriculture and food, not agriculture, agriculture and food account for a third of all greenhouse gas emissions, and the entire Paris budget for the carbon, to keep us to below 1.5 degrees of global warming, will be eaten up by food, literally, in the 2040s. So unless we absolutely transform agriculture, we are going to be in a situation where we're locked into the long terms of climate destabilization, etc. So this was mentioned several times this morning, but I really want to emphasize this. We are not talking about the need for sustainability in terms of tweaking the number of pollinators in the fields. We are talking about a whole-scale difference in the way that we have to do food. I'd like to then back up what Giovana da Silva said about getting out of our silos. We have to get out of our silos in terms of thinking from a systemic perspective and joining up food to health, to environment, to production. Because only when you start thinking about the food as a system do you realize how, from a rational perspective, how silly our food system is at the moment. It is creating huge amounts of damage to health, either undernutrition or overnutrition. It is creating huge environmental damage, including the climate change issues, and it is not doing what we would want from a sustainable food system. So to meet food and nutrition security going ahead, I think we need to do a whole range of different things. In the developing world, we mentioned it a bit this morning, there is scope for sustainable intensification. We absolutely need to grow yields and grow yields in a sustainable way. We can do that. But in the developed world, what I think we really need to do is find a way of diversifying our food system. We produce far too much commodity crops, we waste too much, we don't produce enough vegetables, we have unhealthy diets, and we end up with a situation where in the European Union, about 3 million deaths a year occur because of diet-related ill health. And yet, when we think about the regulations around our food system, we tend to think about the 5,000 people a year who are killed by food safety issues. The quality of the food and the ability to have a good diet.
So no use of the word intensification in Europe anymore?
So what I would drive for is that I think we have got a lot of scope for new business models about growing different things in different ways. If I want to, as an ecologist, if I want to buy something that is sustainable, I now have the capability of going online to a farmer who is producing the goods that I want. I do not have to go into a supermarket and choose from 100 different things, all labeled in confusing ways where the lowest common denominator is price. So I think the emerging new technology of the new markets will allow us to diversify our farming production. That will bring us environmental benefits. If we reduce waste and if we eat wisely, we can save a huge chunk of land. That will free up space for carbon capture and storage. It will free up space for biofuels. We're into a win for the planet, win for our healths, win for the farming economy, and win, 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 win. But only if we can find ways to do that business transformation. And for me, the diversification comes from promoting new business models.
Okay. Well, Tim, thanks very much for your opener. Giovana, your opening thoughts.
Graziano said something about integration of sectors and integration of countries to really deliver the CDGs. And I really think that the solution is to go through that. We, in Brazil, we are well known about Amazon, about deforestation, about samba and football. And we are much more than it. And now we realize together with Europe and together with other countries that we are not just an agricultural colony. We are not just an agricultural provider. We really need to work together because we have to face problems from our exportation. If you mind that, for example, 20% of our soy production comes to Europe, 60% to China, and we are exporting not just soy, we are exporting water, we are exporting biodiversity, we are exporting social problems, we are exporting, confronting with indigenous people and rural people. So
your agricultural system's a disaster, basically.
No, our agricultural system is really, really very developed today, but we have a difference between the commodities system, that they are very technological and big areas, and we have smallholders that almost don't have support and assistance. So I think we have two fronts, but we need to realize that if you are eating a beef here, this beef used feed for soy from Brazil, for example, and you are eating biodiversity and a lot of things. So why not to collaborate to these producers in Brazil to keep biodiversity areas inside rural areas? It's possible to have these sustainable landscapes. We are proud to do very huge projects in Brazil with support of European entities, companies, government, civil society. We are proud because we really have results on the ground.
Yeah, but I want to be clear about what you're saying. Are you saying it is time to roll back, to reverse much of the commodification of your agriculture sector, to reverse this sort of industrialized production of soya and beef, to end it, you know, to go in a different direction altogether?
I would not say that it's different direction. I just say I think commoditization of agriculture is something difficult to revert. But what I'm saying is now we are thinking differently. Europe, in the beginning, just put requirements and forbid something. I want deforestation free, I want certification, I want something and that. But Europe was not helping before. And now I think European entities realize that they need to help to really have healthy food, healthy environment for everybody. Because Europe and Brazil, we are linked. All the impacts that we have there maybe can cause droughts here or problems in the carbon cycle. So we really need to do in a global view.
Right, so it's the new non-siloed, holistic, cooperative thinking is not just within national governments or political institutions like the EU, it's also across continents. It's much greater cooperation between regions of the world. It all sounds great if we can deliver it. And
we can.
Well, we've got to reflect on what we heard from our political speakers, the EU Commissioner and the FAO Chief. Okay, that's a great contribution, Giovana, thank you. William, World Farmers Organization, it sounds spookily like sort of the farmers are taking over the world when you read it out like that. But I know that's not strictly true. But what's your sort of take on the transformational challenge?
Well, the farmers feed the world, so maybe we do have control. But what I wanted to do to start with, just in the introduction, is give you a New Zealand perspective, because I'm a farmer in New Zealand, and
what do you farm?
Sheep and beef, and we typical.
And why is that getting a giggle? Why is him farming sheep and beef making you giggle? There must be a subtext here too.
About all they farm.
So we also, as the blurb says, have a biotechnology company, which I started from our family farm 20 years ago with my brother. So we sell to pharmaceutical companies biological products.
What kind of biological products?
Animal serums, recombinant proteins,
well, you shouldn't
enzymes.
You shouldn't have to look. You produce the wretched
No, just
stuff.
sorry, my computer went off. Enzymes and
oh, so you're quite cutting edge, basically.
I guess so.
Anyway, I'll shut up and stop interrupting you. Go on.
So look, I think the first thing is that that when we're deciding what to produce as farmers in New Zealand, we do look to the market, and we have very clear signals which aren't blurred by trade restrictions, by tariffs, and by subsidies, or at least to a greater extent. In the 1980s, we transformed our economy. We removed subsidies and opened up our economy completely. And we realized that subsidies limited our land use and our production system options. It locked us into a system of dependency. And that also the value of those subsidies was actually captured somewhere else in the production and supply chain. So in taking off subsidies, that was a hard exercise for us, but it actually empowered farmers, and we have to say are still enjoying the ride. It's an exhilarating ride, and we're in the middle of it still. So our economy is now, our agricultural economy is now more diverse and it's more robust. We've looked at climate change and we've responded to the challenge of climate change. Our government, with our farmers, set up the Global Research Alliance on Greenhouse Gases, and that focuses on biological emissions, on soil carbon, and on farming systems. And we're making some great strides, and there's some new technologies coming along that are going to make a big difference in terms of what we can contribute to reducing particularly methane. And those technologies are actually going to be able to be used by farmers right around the world, not just New Zealand farmers.
I'm sorry, I can't resist interrupting. We heard from the European Commissioner that he claims a significant decrease in the emissions from European agriculture. But if one takes world agriculture, I'm guessing emissions are still going up significantly year on year.
Emissions are going up, but so is food supply. So if you look at agriculture in New Zealand, over the last 2 decades, in terms of animal protein production, we've reduced our carbon intensity, that's the amount of carbon dioxide produced per kilogram of product, by 1 to 2% every year, year on year. And so that's quite a significant reduction, and that's going on. And that's just not because we were trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but we were trying to be more productive. So I think these things can be quite synergistic. I think the other point is that we've been working with environmental groups to find practical solutions to water quality, and we're developing water storage and irrigation to build resilience against climate change. And finally, if I can reflect some of the comments of Mr. De Silva, there's a new and more realistic discussion about biotechnology and about gene editing in particular. I think this is a revolution which is gathering pace, and we ignore its opportunities at our peril. Used appropriately, I think this technology offers many of the transformational solutions that this conference actually seeks. We're trying to move past the binary argument of organics on one side and genetic modification on the other. I think there's a place for everything. We can learn from every farming system, and if we as farmers around the world are to enhance our environmental and consumer outcomes, we need to access all the tools of modern science.
Okay, I suspect John will perhaps pick up on that theme before too long, but Bernard, it's your turn. So just a brief introduction, your thoughts on what you think is most important about addressing this challenge, this transformational challenge.
Well, to be rather positive and not talking just about issues and challenges, but about solutions, there is an observation that we can all make, which is there are close to 500 million smallholder farmers in the world. They are quite poor. They have limited resources, limited access to technologies and capital, and low education in many cases. But nevertheless, they produce 70% of the food needs of the planet. And it's for local market, but also it's for international and global markets, right? So when we see that, we say, okay, they are just able to do that with the situation that they are suffering from. So when we look at the trends, I can observe 2 trends which are quite encouraging for all of us. First, there is probably enough knowledge, enough technologies, enough science, enough capital to develop at large scale models which are impactful from an economic, social, and environmental point of view. Probably disruptive innovation will come in the future, but so far today we have enough. Second, there is a very deep transformation that is just starting with the industry. A deep transformation of the supply chain. What was called in the past, and a little bit today, still today, commodities. More and more, large corporations, but also middle-sized companies, understand that traceability will become a must. So the idea that what I buy as a raw material has an influence on the life of farmers, but also on environment, and at the end of the day, globally, if we consider, for example, climate change, is becoming something that is admitted and shared in a majority of companies. The journey will be long, there will be up and downs. But what I can see, if we just compare over the past 10 years, a very deep change. And companies are starting to equip themselves, because the challenge today is about what are the models which will help empower the small farmers, reach scale, and reach impact. So now it's not only about what should be done to address the issues, but how to do it. And I think it's a journey. It will be long, but it has started. And I can see inside the company, in the Livelihoods Fund, we have about 10 corporations that have joined forces in an investment fund, and I can see the transformation happening. I'm not saying it's all positive and perfect, not at all, but we are learning through this process. And we are pretty sure that tomorrow, consumers will, probably most of them, will be quite clear on traceability. We cannot ignore what we provide to the consumers. We ignore what is the impact of what we offer to our consumers.
But isn't the bottom line that what most consumers care about most in most parts of the world is price? And underpinning a lot of discussion, that we have around these issues of sustainability and transformation of food production is a very difficult question. If a real, they talk about putting a real price on carbon. If a real price is put on food and food production in the context of climate change, a planet which is really struggling to sustain itself, if a real price is put on food and the farmer himself isn't to bear the brunt of that price by his margins being ever more reduced, then somebody else is going to have to pay that price. And by and large, it's going to be the consumer. And the consumer doesn't want to pay that price. And if you say, oh, well, in the future, Danone's totally committed to getting more and more of our milk or whatever from small producers and organic, holistic farms, you ain't going to get it as cheap as you're going to get it from your industrialized cow factories. And somebody's going to have to pay the price. And are you saying we as a society, as a selection of societies, are ready to accept that debate and accept the price implications? And people are going to say, yeah, I'll bear the cost of that. Mm-hmm. Are we there?
Okay. First, I think nobody can say the consumer. There is a huge variety of expectation from a variety of consumers in different parts of the world. So an increasing part of them, but a minority, wants this kind of organic or quite high premium approach. But the majority of them are not interested or motivated in that. But look at the productivity of the small farmers I was mentioning. I will give you an example later on today. When you have 3 liters per cow average per day in Kenya, the question is about productivity. How can you increase the productivity from 3 liters to 6 to 9 to 12? The issue is not just about the price. It's about how we can increase the income of the farmers. In many parts of the world, there is a very low baseline, a very huge potential for improvement. It's not of course, the same situation in developed economy where we are already at a very high level of productivity and where the issue is more about how we can combine high productivity and sustainability. But in the developing world, there is a huge gap. We can increase a lot, but how can we do it without degrading the natural resources that we will need in the future?
All I'm saying is that if there is a price implication, in the context of this discussion about eradicating hunger and delivering food security to the entire global population, if you are, in essence, talking about raising the price of food to encapsulate the issues in food production, you're actually making food less available to the poorest.
Well, you know, the way you're approaching the issue, it reminds me when we were talking about environment in our factories. Being quite good on environment at the time was associated with higher cost. And I think we have demonstrated with the whole industry that, in fact, the way we approach low impact on energy, for example, was, in fact, also lowering the cost and increasing the productivity. So I'm not sure that necessarily developing sustainable agriculture means high cost and high price for consumers. This is where we, the industry, the farmers, the governments, we have to find the right balance. And that's the difficulty of the coming years, yes?
Well, I suspect this is an area we'll want to come back to. Tim, you're giving me facial signals that suggest you've got things to say about this. But I want to hear John now. So, John, give us your sort of opening gambit on this.
Thank you very much. Well, the title of this session is about solutions, and we've heard a lot, and I think the context is really important. I mean, a Sustainable Development Goal number 2, to end hunger, achieve food security, improve nutrition, promote sustainable agriculture. This would be difficult enough, but a lot of the trends are against us. Population 7 billion, heading for 9. 2 billion of us eat too much. Nearly 1 billion of us don't get enough. And then Tim's comments, which I think are really, really important to grasp, that agriculture is responsible for nearly 1/3 of man-made greenhouse gases. That puts us firmly in the dock, in the accused person's space with a case to answer. And this is heading, according to Tim, and I accept his assessment here, 4 or 5 degrees of climate change here. My understanding of that is that's disaster. It's disaster for the world. It's disaster for food production.
I mean, we've just, if we take Paris seriously, just committed not just to keeping it below 2 degrees, but keeping it below, what was it, 1.6 or something, or at least aiming for that.
Aiming for 1.5.
And that's a really good point to make, because we've all just committed to that, but now we have to deliver on it. And committing and delivering are 2 different things, which is somewhere I want to go with this. We've heard several times this morning it's a complex system problem. And I'm going to do the simple thing, and I hope nobody sees it as a cop-out, but I'm going to comment on the things I can contribute to. When I say I mean we.
That's what you're here for.
At Syngenta. We clearly need, as a world, to be able to grow more or the same, if we can crack the waste problem, but more or the same from less inputs and resources. That's clear. In my humble opinion, this solution globally has to involve the world's smallholder farmers, be they 500 million or my number is 450 million. That's where we have the most opportunity for improvement. It's where there's the most need. There's a shortfall in nutrition. There's a shortfall in income. This is about the very livelihood of a vast swathe of the world's population. And to do this, it requires things that certainly my company can help with: technology, innovation, but above all else, knowledge and training and education. We have to change growing systems. We have to provide quality inputs, seeds, fertilizers, crop protection, chemistry, and we have to provide education and training. And in 30 years working in the private sector, in the agricultural industry, if I've learned one thing, it's that progress requires clear objectives, targets, measurement, and above all, action. And I think the UN Sustainability Development Goals provide the clear objectives. And what we've done in Syngenta, and it's very, very modest, but what we've done is we've set out a number of goals in what we've called our Good Growth Plan. And we've made those targets very public. I won't go into all the details, but improving productivity in the major crops, I still think has a role to play. If we can produce more from the same or more from less, Empowering smallholders is critical. We've set targets for the number that we will reach out to and improve their productivity. Helping biodiversity, and one of the critical issues that's really, really urgent is rescuing farmland from desertification. We can help with those things, look after every worker and help make people safe. But the problem is our contribution is very modest, and really neither a company like Syngenta nor any other body, be it government, NGO, farmers collectively, none of us on our own can really achieve what we need to achieve here. And so, you know, the business as usual won't cut it phrase, I think, is very relevant. And we're going to have to park our prejudices, us at Syngenta included. And I very much appreciated William's comments along these lines that, you know, we've got to get over some of our phobias and we've got to move into collaboration, helping each other. And we've got to change some of our ideas here.
I'll very quickly get to questions, but it just seems, some bells are ringing for me, comparisons with other debates, and in particular the sort of energy debate, global energy production and consumption debate. Everybody will tell you the easiest, biggest, best win to transform the global energy picture is to cut out waste, you know, to insulate homes and buildings better, to just be more efficient in the way we use power. You can have an endless debate about what forms of power generation you use, but in the end, so much of the margin of what we need to achieve can be done by just being more efficient. And isn't that true in this debate as well? You know, you all with your different stakes in this have spent very little time talking about eradicating the criminal amount of waste in our global food system. And it seems to me somehow, you know, if we're talking concrete and specific ways to change the food production and consumption system, that's got to be really close to the top.
Yeah, well, if I can tackle that one. On a global basis, we produce enough calories, broadly speaking, for 11 billion people. A third of them...
That's the official...
That's
in
right.
essence, we're producing enough, more than, well, for pretty much 4 billion people that don't currently exist.
So, and then 4 billion people's worth of calories are fed to livestock for the meat and dairy industry. And then on top of that, as John said, about 2 billion people are overweight or obese, and if you look at the physiological statistics of that, that's about 20% of what they ingest is wasted because it's unnecessary calories. So if you put all of those three things together, if we ate wisely and we didn't waste stuff, we would only need about 1/3 to 40% of production in the world. So I think efficiency is really, really part of this, and changing the diet, as Achim said earlier, no one's talking about a vegetarian world, but we don't have to eat meat every single meal. And as soon as we get away from the notion that intensively fed livestock is something that we need to have cheap day in, day out, you have the whole potential of freeing up great chunks of the world and the agricultural economy to do things like grow biofuels.
Right, what you've just said is so interesting. Why do I feel that that doesn't get much airtime in this discussion? I mean, you know, is it because it's not sexy? Is it because it doesn't involve... You know, no offense, John, but companies like yours being able to expand your business and deliver more profit and more return for your shareholders, is, you know, because it's about not doing stuff or doing stuff more intelligently rather than expanding and intensifying.
Well, I think, you know, our industry is not expanding; it's actually consolidating, and that's a whole different story because the growth is not there. And so be it. That's okay. But our industry contributes, actually, to the very problem that you're talking about. I mean, today, we can get food to supermarkets in a much better state than we used to be able to when I was a kid. I mean, I don't remember eating an apple before I was 10 that didn't have a worm in it. And, you know, when you went to the grocer, you had a whole mixture of quality. And this is all contributing to waste. We can overcome that now with technology, through breeding, through the protection against the diseases and so on and so forth. So there's a contribution there. But if you go to Bloomberg this morning, you'll see there's a report in there that announces that, and it's not news, but it's news this morning for Bloomberg, that from Ethiopia to South Africa, the effects of El Nino and the dry period we've been through are exacerbating the shortage of food in that region of the world. And it very explicitly says the glut of grain in the rest of the world won't help them because they can't afford it. And this is why I think training and education, it can't overcome drought, but it can certainly help them to manage the adverse vagaries of the weather patterns, and it can enable smallholders to be better farmers, more reliable, with more assurance of producing crops, and to store them once they have produced them. So I do believe that companies like mine, with technology, with knowledge, with know-how, and with the reach to get to these parts of the world, has a huge contribution to make.
I'm going to ask one more broad brush question, then I'm going to get to the audience. What, you know, we're in Brussels. Most people, not all people in the room, many people in the room have a global perspective, but some people in the room have a very European perspective. What concrete, you know, what, if one was to prioritize one single thing that could be done in the European agricultural system now, which perhaps would be a model for others to follow, or which conversely might be something Europe could actually take on board from the way things are done elsewhere, I'd like you all to give me one concrete thing you think that Europe right now needs to do to change its own method of food production, its own agricultural system, that would really benefit Europe and the world.
Yeah, well, can I just continue on the theme that I had before?
Yeah.
And I think that European farmers and European society in general needs to realize that the decisions they make, the choices they make, actually reflect across the world. So when we're looking at new technologies, and I come back to Mr. De Silva's comments, when we're looking at new technologies, the aversion to these new technologies that the Europeans have is actually reflected in my country. It limits the technologies that we can use in my country.
You mean...
Because we're too scared to use them.
New Zealanders look at the fear factor in Europe, and they think, God, if the Europeans think that they're dangerous, there's no way we're going to...
We're paralyzed by fear. And I think many African countries...
Or you could say you're informed by great wisdom. It depends how you look at it.
You could say that, but I think what we've got to be really, really conscious of is that we've got to make our decisions based on sound evidence. And I think, you know, we all accept the scientific consensus that climate change is happening. There's an equally strong scientific consensus that these technologies are as safe to use as conventional agriculture.
Well, I wonder if there's anybody, we're going to get to questions in just a moment. I wonder whether some hands will shoot up and tell you that's not true, that there's no comparison between the consensus on climate change and the consensus on tech in food.
I'll say there is. There'll easily be someone in the audience that might say there isn't. Doesn't make either of us
Fair point.
wrong.
No, quite. It doesn't prove either of you right either. Right. I know we could go on forever and get nowhere. But anyway, I take your point, and thank you. So that's where the way you see Europe, perhaps at the moment, being a malign influence on one very concrete aspect of transformation in food production.
And I do think, again, we need to be thinking about the new technology. You know, genetic modification is sort of old hat really now. The new technologies of gene editing. Right. Which are going to be completely different in terms of the regulatory aspects of that. And also the risk profile of that sort of technology is much easier to explain to the public. So I think we need to be open-minded as we move into this new debate.
Okay, any other thoughts on Europe? I mean, the Commissioner was here telling us a very happy story of how Europe's learned from past mistakes. The CAP is now wonderful, and we're cooperating all around the world with African countries, and where, you know, we're so socially responsible, it's unbelievable. That's the Commissioner's view. Go on.
Well, it would be, wouldn't it? He would say that. I think there is a very important role that we have this entity called the Common Agricultural Policy, I think, recognise the need for that to move away from it to being a subsidy with the market distortion, etc. But I think where we can show global leadership, and I agree to a certain extent with William in terms of we do excellent science here, we can export some of the science, not just GM. But I think in global leadership terms, if we can show how we can manage environmental goods and services alongside the agricultural production, for me, having worked on sustainability for 20 years, sustainability is not a recipe that you can do on a farm. Sustainability is about maintaining the goods and services that people want from an agricultural landscape, whether that's flood protection, clean water, biodiversity, recreation, amenity, look at the landscape, cultural biodiversity, all of those sorts of stuff. How can we use the Common Agricultural Policy as a payment for the ecosystem services to push that sustainability as well as the production of food? There aren't many good examples around the world where there are policy levers that could be used wisely, and the CAP has got a very long way to go to be able to maximize its potential in that space.
Okay. Anybody else want to contribute? Yeah.
I have another comment. Just when Europe also thinks about other countries, I think it must be open to that the solution here in Europe is not the solution in tropical countries or in other climate, because sometimes, for example, in Brazil for cattle ranching, intensification is a solution, but it's not the intensification like I see in Parma when I live there. It's intensification to cross from 1 cattle per hectare to 3 cattle per hectare. And this is so positive for deforestation rates. In São Félix do Xingu, where we work, it's one municipality that has the size of 2 Belgiums. Can you believe it's one municipality, one county? And there we have the biggest cattle ranch areas in Brazil. We are working there for several years, and we triple the productivity of the producers that we are working. And we still have 20, 30 producers doing that, but we can scale up quickly if we have support and we can do things together. So I think there are a lot of good examples, creative examples all over the world, but I think we need to really change this mindset that there is just one solution. I think each place is different, and when we speak, for example, about deforestation in Amazon, people just think, oh, just go there and stop that. It's not that, just stop that. It would be easy, but we really need to give economic opportunities because we have people in Amazon living there. They need to eat, they need to get profits, so the solution is not, I will not eat meat because it comes from Amazon deforestation. No, we need to really go there and try to see the things happen. And in this municipality, we decreased the rate from deforestation 90% in the last 20 years. So it's possible to do something beautiful.
Yeah, it's a good and heartening example. Unless, panel, you desperately want to say something right now, I'm going to open it up to the audience. So, right, you've got a panel here of terrific insight and experience in different sort of elements of the food production, rural economy, global, European, whatever. So there's a whole range of questions I can imagine might come up. Let us see what happens. You guys are great at raising your hands. So let's start on this side, and then we'll move across. But can we get a microphone to the lady with her hand up on that side to start with? Do we have our microphones? Where are our microphones? Oh, goodness. There's a total lack of microphones. I can hear somebody running.
Yeah.
Running towards, oh, yes. There's footsteps. They're approaching. Somebody will emerge with a microphone. Here they go. That's almost worth a round of applause. No, the lady, the lady standing up over there. There you go. Right. Go on, ma'am.
Hello. I'm from the Brazilian Agriculture Confederation, and I just would like to ask Giovana some questions because we know that the
challenge... Well, you can only have one, because loads of people want to ask questions.
Okay.
Give us your best question.
The biggest challenge here in Europe is misinformation. I heard some misinformation here today, and I just wanted to know, what do you think it's best for us to do as the representative of the Brazilian farmers to deal with this misinformation and make sure that proper and information comes to Europe from the Brazilian producers?
Just give us what, because most of us won't really know what is your beef particularly. What is the biggest bit of misinformation you've heard today that you're kind of slightly...
That our production system is a disaster. We have
like you say.
Oh dear, so that's me. All right, so I am obviously peddling misinformation, or maybe I'm not alone. How do you combat misinformation? You know, and I guess the negative aspects of the perception of Brazilian agricultural production.
Yes, maybe one of the biggest misinformation is about Amazon. People want to just put a wall in Amazon and that's it. And we are working with agroforestry, with cocoa, we are working with small holders. We are working with big holders too, but I think there are solutions to do there, and we are really successful in Brazil to decrease deforestation rates.
But just to tell people, I mean, remind people, you work for Nature Conservancy.
Yes.
So maybe you think Brazilian farmers are doing some bad stuff too. I mean, maybe your interest and our questioner's interest aren't aligned either.
As an NGO, we are not a combative NGO. We work together with producers. For me, producers are the solution for increasing sustainability. They are dealing with their lands, not me. So the unique thing that I can do, I can help. And even, what's her name, sorry? Camila, sorry, hello Camila. As Camila, no, as Camila said about producers, they are facing a lot of difficulties on the ground, like our forest code, that's very hard to follow, because in Amazon, you can just use 20% of your land, 80% you need to let the forests. In Cerrado areas, is 20%, you can use 80%, is the opposite. But still, I think there are not other countries that have this kind of law. We don't say that we are perfect, but if we put this kind of law, and when we buy products from Brazil, we say, oh, you need to follow, your law is the first principle, okay, let's help. Because it's not easy to just use 20% of the land.
All right. Well, thank you. And Brazil is such an important producer, particularly, you know, with the place you have in the world in terms of your ecosystems. It's great to get a little more detail on what's happening. And I thank you for the question too. Right. Hands up again. Let's get to another. We'll go over here and then we'll come back here. And I will look at the back, I promise. But can we get a microphone? Oh God, I'm making everybody run. Sorry. You're doing a great job with the microphone. Sir, give us a pithy, brief question.
Yes, hello. Mark Sutton, the International Nitrogen Initiative. I was a bit fazed by the comment of the Commissioner about environment and food security having a balance between the two, since it seems to be we should be looking for the win-wins. Part of that win-wins is improving efficiency. We're working on that in improving nitrogen use efficiency. Currently, 25% of the cap is lost as nitrogen losses up into the air and down in the water. The big challenge seems to me to be about the food choice. We've looked at what would be the effect of a Demetarian scenario, Demetarian being half meat consumption, and that would reduce pollution losses massively across Europe. But how are we going to find a way forward in the economics whereby reducing meat consumption is going to make more profit for farmers? So what are the ideas of the panel of how to find more profit with less meat?
Good, very concrete question. Who wants to answer it?
So as I kind of presaged at the start, Mark, I think part of the solution is at the moment you go into a supermarket and there's everything's labelled, and no consumer believes the labels. We've done lots of work on that in the UK. No, people just distrust labels. They think green labels are greenwashing. They think health labels are redwashing, etc. Whereas I know I've been working with some farmers in one of our nice upland areas, the Yorkshire Dales, who came to me 5 years ago and said, we can't compete with lowland agriculture because our sheep grow slowly and we have to look after them in this nice countryside and so on. But they've started to market these directly to consumers who want to buy, who can trust. And so I think the segmentation of the market in terms of producing less, buying less, wasting less, seeing it as a treat rather than an everyday staple, and switching round from it being a commodity to being it something that is really valued and being willing to pay more for it. And the quid pro quo is that you waste less of it and do it in a different way. And I think the stratification of the market, the technology is coming along to allow that sort of thing, artisanal cheese producers to directly market and not have to go through a big supermarket, allowing small-scale production and then diversification and a whole range of other things.
Does that answer the question, which was about how you deliver a 50% reduction in meat consumption and yet maintain the vibrancy of the agricultural economy?
So for me, it's about profitability of the agricultural economy and not just productivity. And although we can argue about what productivity means, we have typically over the last 10, 15 years thought about productivity in terms of the absolute amount, kilograms, calories produced, and so on. Whereas actually what is important for the economy is that farmers make the profit. And that might mean selling less, but selling it more expensively. And so the challenge is, your one that you asked earlier, for the poorest, do we artificially keep food prices down by externalizing the costs, or do we find a way to pay the poorest a living wage to allow them to pay the more expensive costs of the real cost of food production? And that's a social challenge, which I think we ought to grasp.
And for the SDGs and the whole context of this debate, which is a wiser course?
Both. No, but we can't. We've got to. The poorest in the world need to have wages, or they need to develop economically in a way that will allow them to exist. But the answer to that is not to artificially keep the food prices down of the food system in such a way that it creates long-term damage to us and to the planet. And so we have to tackle that head on, that if we carry on producing at very, very low cost, that externalizes the costs. And then there is a long-term issue that then has to be dealt with. So the easiest way is to try and internalize those costs and find a way to help the poorest have a living wage and live in a way that they can afford the food, so the access to the food doesn't go down.
I think we need to be careful that having a cute story and increasing the return is not the same thing as increasing sustainability. This is a worldwide problem, and we need to have the most sustainable farmers in the various production systems that we possibly can. So there may be, under that scenario, a better land use for that particular farmer. But I'd also make the point that, coming to this gentleman's question, that there is going to be more protein demand for animal protein. Whether individually we cut down, and for some of us that would be a good idea, but the demand for protein is going to go up. So I agree with Tim in terms of market segregation, but I think the market segregation is going to be more around plant proteins substituting for meat proteins, and in fact, don't want to be too much on the biotech bandwagon, but synthetic meats.
You're definitely on that bandwagon.
Yeah, synthetic meats actually moving into that space as well. So farmers will get a better return because they'll be instead of selling hamburger meat, they'll be selling prime cuts, and much more of that meat will be going into the prime top end of the market where people can afford it and want to eat it, and those other areas are going to be much more commodified, right. And I think that'll split it up, and I think that's better sustainability. I'm
going to stop you there because I want to get some more questions in. Right. I ought to go to the back if there is one at the back, and there is the gentleman at the back. Sorry, microphone people, but could you stand up, sir, so they can see you? Yeah, thank you. Can we get a microphone to the back? And then I'll come to the front here.
Yes, hello. Tim Bradshaw, CLA, London. I'd just like to make one comment. It doesn't appear to be anybody representing the retailers on any of the panels or questions today.
Right.
And the comment was made by Mr. Parr regarding vegetable quality. We're currently throwing away in the UK 40 to 50% of the carrots or parsnips that we're growing, grading out to meet specifications for retailers. A colossal wastage, and waste has been quite a feature of many of the speakers' comments. Could somebody just comment on the panel from a retailer's perspective with the amount of waste that we're throwing away of perfectly good quality vegetables? Thank you.
I was only this morning discussing weirdly shaped parsnips with somebody, and now we've got a question about it. So, answer the question. John, you were talking.
I can only answer it as a consumer. I don't have any professional qualification for this, but there is something bizarre about the consumer's requirement for perfectly formed, identical pieces of fruit and vegetables. To the best of my knowledge, that doesn't confer any additional nutritional value upon them. And what I can't decide in my mind is, are the retailers, the supermarkets in Europe, are they creating that requirement, or are they responding to it? But what I would say is...
I thought, I must have made this up in my head. I thought you sort of implied earlier that amongst your many wonderful products to help the farmer, you had products which almost guaranteed perfectly shaped vegetables.
Well, we have agricultural systems that virtually guarantee that. I mean, if you go to one of the big apple processing locations in northern Italy, as I've done many times, you'll see the most incredible technology working. Apples float down swimming lanes of water to protect them, and they're sorted for size, for shape, for color. So you can have packs of 4 apples with 4 different color apples, the same color apples. This is the requirement that we, the consumer, has either created or is responding to.
It's insane, isn't it? It's a chicken and egg thing. How do you break that cycle of absurd demand for sort of perfection?
It comes back as well to the previous question. There's 2 different things, in my view, going on here: supply side, demand side. And on the demand side, this is a consumer education issue. And I think if I link it back to the question, what should we do different in Europe, that came earlier on, I think a lot of the time we're having the wrong discussion in Europe. We're talking about the wrong things. We're on average somewhat phobic about technology. We're fearful of technology for whatever reasons. Maybe people like me have done a bad job of explaining it, but we're fearful of technology, and yet at the same time we're not having a debate about the consequence, the health consequence of overeating, to the same extent that we worry ourselves about the minuscule risks associated with the technology that that's been referred to here. So I think on the demand side, Europe's having the wrong debate. We don't understand risk, and that is leading to us obsessing about things that are already very, very safe and overlooking things that are actually very, very damaging, very threatening, not only to our health, but to the environment as well. So that's the one side. On the supply side, the technology helps to alleviate the problem, but it won't solve it.
Okay. Good. Well, it was an interesting question. Thank you very much. Right, we've got a forest of hands here, all organically grown. So we'll start with you, sir. Yes, the gentleman at the back of the forest. Then we'll try and move through the forest if we've got time.
Thank you. Andrew Street, an East Anglian farmer. I muddle around on 2,000 hectares. But I think from what we've heard today, the European Union has totally ruined what we're trying to propose. They've closed the small slaughterhouses. You're not allowed to keep the odd cow. You have to have 24 labels on it. When I was young, there was a cow, a sheep, a pig on everybody's land. Now there are none. Why not?
Yeah, you look like you could take that on.
Just briefly, we've only got a minute and a half left.
Do you have a cow and a pig and a sheep in your back garden?
No, I've just got some sheep.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
All right.
I think part of the issue here is it's not the European Union's fault. It is responding to consumer worries. And I have some sympathy with what John's just been saying. We as a society manage risk in multiple different ways, and one of the criminal things, not just ploughing back in bent carrots or scabby carrots, is that we don't feed animal food to pig waste, and that's what pigs have evolved for, you know, because of our worry about foot and mouth disease and all the rest of that. And so what we have done is that we have taken a risk and we have enshrined it as this is difficult to do, this is frightening, and then put that into a risk framework that means that as a society, we have pushed away all of these sorts of things, and the benefits of doing what you've just done are then lost to the system. But it's like I said earlier, 5,000 people die a year in Europe from food poisoning, 3 million die a year in diet-related stuff, but we tend to, when we talk about food and the safety of food, we only talk about Campylobacter and Salmonella. We don't talk about these long-term nutritional issues, and that's because of the way we think about risk. So, you know, I think there is an issue there about how do we manage risk, and how do we, here is a risk, here is one way of dealing with it, here is another way of dealing with it, which still rebuilds the circular economy and some of the things, the benefits of doing things, not in the old ways, but doing things with the old efficiencies.
Right, well, talking of efficiencies, I've been inefficient because time management hasn't gone quite to plan, because I know there are lots of questions still on the floor, and we're kind of out of time, pretty much. But I'm not going to let you go, panel, without one final word, couple of words from each of you. I want one, because this is all about getting specific and bringing your insights, your personal experience and your professional insights into concrete solutions. So I want one thing, you know, Achim Steiner says, look, time for action right now, right here. So what's the one thing each of you would put forward as a concrete action that could be taken right now that would help this transformation, this adaptation of agricultural systems to the new era of SDGs and everything that goes with them? One concrete action you'd like to see right now, each of you, starting with you, Tim, now.
Nutrient use efficiency, recycling, circular agriculture, those sorts of things.
Whoa, that was way too jargon. Say that slowly in a way that I can understand.
So Alan Buckwell, who's talking this afternoon, did a lovely report yesterday on nutrient recycling. Mark, who asked the question earlier, gave some statistics about it. How do we, instead of throwing a lot of money into chemicals that we throw on the ground, which then evaporate into the air, volatilize into the air and make our health bad, poison the water, how do we actually make this whole nutrient use sensible? And part of that's precision agriculture, part of that is recycling things in a circular agricultural way, whether that is encouraging mixed farming at a landscape scale or even on a farm scale, away from specialization of livestock over there and arable over there, whether it is recycling the nutrients in manure and human waste streams, you know, all of those sorts of things. And all of that circularity would be very beneficial for the sustainability of farming across.
Yes, good. All right, Giovana, one quick action.
For me, it's crucial the integrated approach, like I said before. And for us in Brazil, we know that we will grow a lot landscape agricultural areas. So the way to do that is to establish sustainable landscapes, and to have the sustainable landscapes, we really need to work together. And I'm saying that because the food from my country will not feed just my country, it will feed mostly of the countries of the world in the future. Yeah, because so, we still have 180% of degraded pastures that can be used. Not all for agriculture, but we have space, we still have space to expand, but we are able to expand responsibly. And I totally trust in producers. I think they are very open to this in a good way. And I cannot comply on farmers because in Brazil, they had incentives to the forest before. Right, and they are open to do differently.
Thanks, Giovana. So integration being your key, you know, still room for expanding production, but it's got to be done in the most intelligent, integrated way. Okay, William, quick.
So there's no single fix, I think, that...
No, I'm not asking for a single silver bullet. I'm just saying...
I'm going to give you one.
Oh.
Biotechnology.
there's no single fix, but there does need to be the opportunity for farmers around the world to be able to trade and to be able to use the suite of technologies that it's available to us.
Okay. Bernard.
I think the most important lever will be, especially for developing countries and smallholder farmers, how we empower the farmers. It's about access to education, to knowledge, and to technologies which are at hand. It's also about an entrepreneurial spirit that we need to encourage with farmers, especially the young generation of farmers. One worry I have when visiting many countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America is how many young people having parents as farmers want to farm in the next generation. Will they go, all of them or majority of them, to the city? So how can we make farming attractive? It's about better livelihoods, better efficiency, because what you said before about waste, when you're in developing country, waste is associated to better productivity. It's the same, two pieces of the same issue. There is a lot of waste because they cannot store the harvest. And so, well, the same with the milk, the same with the wheat. So I would say, let's concentrate on who are the main actors of the change, and it will be the farmers, and how those farmers will connect to the market in a broad sense, not only the global market, even local market. The development of large cities in Africa create huge opportunity for smallholder farmers.
So, right, that's good. Real focus on the smallholder farmer across the world. And John, you get the last word.
Fantastic, unusual. I could have gone with any of those four, particularly the smallholder one, but I'll come right back into Europe, and I'd say that what I'd wish for was collaboration between the private sector, the public sector, and the NGOs to have a responsible public debate about healthy eating, less waste, and embracing technology.
Great.
Okay, everybody's nodding to that one. I have really enjoyed this panel discussion. You've been a great panel, well chosen, because you've got lots of different perspectives. I'm slightly over time. It is definitely lunchtime. All that talk about prime beef and improving it got me hungry. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm hand to the panel, and we'll see you after lunch. Thank you very much.